How prison meals are prepared and delivered inside ADX Florence. Before we begin, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of the prison system. Now let's step inside. If you ask most people what prison food looks like, they usually imagine something simple: a tray, a few compartments, and a basic meal. But inside ADX Florence, the process behind that tray is far more structured than it appears. Meals here are not simply cooked and handed out. They move through a tightly controlled system designed to function inside one of the most secure prison environments in the United States. Every step, from preparation to delivery, is shaped by the same principle that defines the entire facility: predictability and control. Before we go deeper into how meals are delivered to inmates, take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This documentary explores details about life inside ADX Florence that most people never hear about, and the full investigation reveals how everyday routines inside a Supermax prison quietly shape inmate behavior over time. Inside the food service areas of ADX Florence, the day begins long before inmates receive their meals. Kitchens operate on carefully scheduled routines that mirror the structured nature of the prison itself. Staff members oversee food preparation, and every movement inside the kitchen is monitored. Large quantities of food are prepared in batches. Industrial cooking equipment handles everything from boiling grains to cooking proteins and vegetables. The goal is efficiency and uniformity. Unlike restaurants or cafeterias where meals are prepared individually, prison kitchens operate more like production lines. The same dish is cooked for hundreds of trays at once. After food is prepared, the next stage begins: portion control. Each tray must contain the same portions. Staff follow measurement guidelines to ensure that the nutritional requirements set by the Federal Bureau of Prisons are met. This ensures that inmates receive adequate calories and balanced meals. But portion control also serves another purpose. Uniform trays reduce the possibility of perceived favoritism or inequality. Inside a Supermax prison, even small differences in food portions could lead to frustration or tension. By making every tray identical, the system eliminates that variable entirely. Once meals are portioned, they are assembled onto trays designed specifically for correctional facilities. These trays are durable, standardized, and organized so that food remains separated and stable during transport. Containers are chosen carefully to prevent spills or misuse. After assembly, trays are loaded onto secure carts, and this is where the process becomes uniquely different from most prisons. Because at ADX Florence, inmates do not gather for meals. Instead, the food must travel through a series of controlled corridors and security checkpoints before it reaches the cell blocks. Staff push the carts through long concrete hallways lined with heavy steel doors. Each section of the prison operates within controlled movement schedules. Doors open and close electronically, allowing staff to move carts from one secured area to the next. The delivery process itself is quiet and methodical. Unlike traditional prisons where inmates line up to receive food, here the food comes to them. When a staff member arrives at a cell door, a small metal slot, often called a food port, opens briefly. The tray slides inside, and the slot closes again. The interaction lasts only seconds. No conversation is required. No eye contact is necessary. For the inmate inside the cell, the moment can feel almost mechanical. The slot opens, the tray appears, and the system moves on to the next door. But something interesting happens when this process repeats day after day, month after month, and year after year. Some inmates begin to structure their entire day around these deliveries. Breakfast becomes the signal that the day has begun. Lunch confirms that time is passing. Dinner marks the final stage of the daily routine. And here is where things become more complex than they might first appear. Because when a person lives in an environment with extremely limited interaction, predictable events begin to carry more meaning. Meals become one of the few consistent signals that time is moving forward. Some inmates listen carefully for the sound of the food cart approaching down the corridor. Others position themselves near the door so they can retrieve the tray immediately when it arrives. Over time, this routine can subtly influence behavior. But here is the deeper question that many people never consider. What happens when a person spends years eating every meal alone, in silence, inside the same small room? The answer begins to reveal itself slowly. Some prisoners become extremely disciplined about routine. They eat their meals at the same pace each day. They return trays immediately. They align themselves with the prison's structured schedule. Others respond in the opposite way. They detach from the routine entirely. Meals are left untouched for hours. Eating becomes mechanical rather than meaningful. The tray is simply another object inside the cell. If you want to understand why these behavioral patterns emerge and what long-term isolation does to the human mind, make sure you subscribe now, because the deeper psychological impact becomes clearer in the next chapters of this documentary. Because inside ADX Florence, the tray sliding through the steel door is not just about food. It is one of the most consistent interactions an inmate has with the outside system. And over time, that simple routine can shape how prisoners think, react, and adapt to life inside the most secure prison in America. Subscribe to see how isolation and prison food begin to change behavior inside ADX Florence. Before we go deeper into this chapter, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. This documentary is revealing the hidden routines inside ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the United States, and how everyday systems like prison food slowly influence inmate behavior over time. Most people have heard the name ADX Florence, but very few understand what daily life inside this facility actually looks like. And even fewer people understand how something as simple as a meal tray can become one of the most powerful behavioral anchors inside a Supermax prison. To understand why, we need to look at what isolation really does to the human mind. Inside ADX Florence, inmates spend nearly the entire day inside a single concrete cell. The room is small. The furniture is fixed to the floor. A narrow window allows a limited view of the sky and distant mountains, but no view of other inmates. Human interaction is extremely limited. For many prisoners, the only consistent external event during the day is the arrival of meals. Breakfast arrives early. Lunch arrives around midday. Dinner arrives later in the afternoon. Every tray arrives through the same steel slot in the same door. Every tray looks nearly identical, and every delivery happens quickly without conversation. At first, this routine may seem insignificant. After all, eating is a normal part of everyday life. But inside a Supermax prison, routine begins to take on a very different meaning. When a person's environment is reduced to only a few predictable events, those events begin to define the structure of the day. For inmates inside ADX Florence, meals often become that structure. Some prisoners begin to wake up before breakfast, listening for the sound of carts moving down the corridor. The clatter of trays becomes a signal that the day has begun. Lunch becomes the midpoint of the day. Dinner becomes the final marker before night. Over time, this routine can shape how prisoners organize their thoughts and behavior. But something else happens as well. When human interaction is removed from everyday experiences, the brain begins to respond differently. Meals are no longer social events. There is no conversation, no shared space, no acknowledgement from another person, just a tray. Some inmates adapt by becoming extremely structured. They eat meals at the same pace every day, sometimes within the same number of minutes. The routine becomes a personal system of control inside an environment where most decisions are made by the institution. Other inmates react differently. Instead of organizing their day around meals, they detach from the routine entirely. The tray arrives. It sits on the surface for a long time. Eventually, the food is eaten, sometimes slowly, sometimes without much attention. Psychologists studying long-term isolation say both reactions are common responses to environments with limited stimulation. One reaction is hyperstructure. The other is emotional withdrawal. But here is the deeper question that makes ADX Florence so unusual. What happens when this routine continues not for days, or weeks, but for years? Before we explore that answer, make sure you subscribe to the channel now, because the next chapters of this documentary reveal something most people never consider about life inside Supermax prisons. Because the longer inmates live inside this system, the more those simple routines, like the arrival of food, begin to influence how they think, react, and survive. Some inmates develop strict personal rituals tied to meals. They arrange food on the tray the same way every day. They eat items in the same order. They return trays at the same moment. These small rituals create a sense of stability inside an environment that rarely changes. Other inmates begin to lose track of time completely. When every day looks the same and interaction is limited, weeks can blur together. Meals become the only signals that a new part of the day has arrived. And in a place like ADX Florence, where silence and routine dominate daily life, those signals can begin to shape behavior in subtle but powerful ways. The tray that slides through the door is not just food. It becomes one of the few reminders that the outside system still exists, that the schedule continues, that the institution is still operating. And over long periods of isolation, those small reminders can carry more psychological weight than most people realize. In the next video, we examine something even more revealing: how the structure of prison food itself, the timing, the design, and the lack of choice becomes part of the control system that defines life inside ADX Florence. If you want to see the rest of this investigation, subscribe to the channel now and continue watching this documentary. Because what happens inside the most secure prison in America goes far deeper than most people imagine.